My thumb knows the path by heart. A slow, steady circle around the porcelain rim of my coffee cup. It is a habit I cannot break. A small, silent prayer for stillness in a world that never stops turning. The warmth of the ceramics seeps into my skin. It is a familiar comfort in the quiet mornings. I often find myself lost in the motion. My mind drifts away from the small anxieties of the day. It is a tiny island of peace. I keep telling Shirley she has it made. She lives here with me after all. She lives in a place where the sun shines most of the time. She has no job to rush to, no husband to please. She is able to indulge her new hobby to the full. But all she wants is out of her own head. I see the same desperate energy in her that I saw in Walter. It is just pointed in a different direction. We share this quiet house on the edge of Roswell. The air here is thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The cicadas provide a constant buzzing soundtrack to our lives. The days unfold with a predictable rhythm. It is a rhythm I have come to cherish. It is a rhythm Shirley seems to find suffocating. While I busy myself with the small tasks that fill a life, I find purpose in them. The weeding in the garden under the hot Georgia sun. The careful dusting of old photographs on the mantelpiece. The endless cups of coffee that mark the passing hours. Shirley potters along the banks of the Chattahoochee. The river calls to her. She says the sound of the water helps her think. I think it helps her not to think. She is searching for stones. Not just any stones. They must be smooth and dark and flecked with pyrite. Fool's gold, my father used to call it. He told me it was the Earth's way of playing a little joke. Shirley does not see the joke. She sees something else entirely. She brings them home and spends hours polishing them with a soft cloth. Her collection grows day by day. It seems like the barometer of Shirley's existence is as steady as a rock. But appearances can be deceptive. I have learned that lesson more than once. This house has seen such steadiness before. It has soaked up 30 years of my own quiet routines. It has also seen the storm that follows. It knows the feel of a gathering tempest. My husband Walter was a man who craved a different kind of weather. He was a man who saw clouds where I saw blue sky. His life here with me was a long stretch of high pressure, a constant, cloudless sky that he found maddening. For 30 years, he was the face of local news channel 7. He was a local celebrity of a very specific kind. People would stop him in the grocery store. They would ask him if they needed to bring in their potted plants. He would stand before a map of Georgia 3 times a day, every day. He would point with a long, elegant finger at our state, and he would tell the viewing public that it was going to be, was another hot one. Then he would come home and peel off his television smile. He would sign on to the internet. That was where his real life was. He was surrounded by the small dramas of our suburban life, the kind of life he openly disdained. Neighbors feuding over property lines that had not changed in 50 years. Bake sales at the church where the same 7 women won all the prizes. The rise and fall of the high school football team's fortunes. It was a world of manageable turbulence. I found it comforting. Walter, however, craved excitement of a different kind. He wanted tempests and typhoons. He wanted something he could not predict with perfect accuracy. The monotony was the problem. He said it was grinding him down into a fine dust. He did not want to learn golf or join the Rotary Club. Those were the things his colleagues did to fill their time. Walter saw them as pathetic surrenders to a life of boredom. No, you have to understand that Walter was one of the few people living in our quiet town who felt he was here under false pretenses. He felt like a spy from a more interesting world. He wanted to get out, to get on, to advance in his chosen career. Above all, he wanted some action. He wanted to feel the wind in his hair, even if it was a hurricane. He dreamed of forecasting real weather. He would sit in his worn armchair, the glow of the television screen on his face. He would watch documentaries about tornadoes in the Midwest. His eyes would light up with a kind of professional envy. He saw beauty in the destruction. He saw a challenge worthy of his intellect. Walter once told me, "They have fantastic climate patterns over in Europe." A dreamy smile touched his face. His voice would drop to a reverent whisper. "Well-defined changes of season. Enough extremes to keep anyone happy. Floods in Germany, avalanches in the French Alps, gale force winds around the North Sea. Wonderful!" It was funny. I would watch him describe these catastrophes. The man never looked more blissful than when he was rattling off a string of natural disasters. He found poetry in the chaos. He did not deny that women were part of the attraction. He had a theory about them, just like he had a theory about everything else. He would say in his solemn way, "Somehow they have more depth than the girls in this part of the world, same as the weather." He believed that a harsh climate forged a more interesting character. He thought our sunny dispositions were just a reflection of our boringly pleasant weather. And that is where the internet came in. It was his portal to that other world, his escape hatch from the predictable sunshine of Georgia. He told me it was mainly to keep in touch with developments in his profession. That was the official story, the one he used when I asked about the late hours. He said he was studying research papers, seeking out job opportunities. I knew for a fact that he spent a lot of his time just chatting with young ladies. He was living a second life in the ones and zeros. He claimed to be a killer flirt in cyberspace. I never saw any evidence of it in the real world. He was mostly quiet and awkward around women. I thought he was joking, though, when he said he had made a romantic connection online. It seemed too much like a fantasy. It was only when he started out for Hartsfield-Jackson Airport that I realized he was serious. He had packed a bag. He was wearing his best shirt. He had a hopeful, terrified look on his face. It seemed the girl came from somewhere in Central Europe. He never told me the exact country. He said it was better to be mysterious. Walter had been bombarding her with electronic flattery for months. He had crafted a persona for himself. He was a worldly, sophisticated weatherman from a glamorous American city. He was working his way up to a request for free board and lodging in Transylvania or wherever she came from. But the girl had beaten him to the punch. She was more direct than he had anticipated. He said, looking sheepish, invited herself over for a holiday. His eyes would not meet mine. Then he brightened. A genuine, boyish excitement broke through his embarrassment. But my turn next. And then, with a hopeful grin that was pure Walter, he added, "Boy, I hope she is good-looking." It turned out that he had not even asked to see her picture. He claimed it was a matter of principle. He said he was interested in her mind, not her appearance. I knew it was something else. He was either a real cool dude or the most desperate man I had ever met. I leaned toward the latter. I tried telling him not to raise his hopes. I tried to prepare him for the inevitable disappointment. I said she would probably be as ugly as the weather in Transylvania, the human equivalent of lashing rain and ice-cold winds. But I could tell he was not listening. He was already at the airport in his mind. He was greeting the sophisticated European woman of his dreams. That night, after he left, the house felt unnaturally quiet. I found the broken pieces of my grandmother's teacup on the kitchen floor. It was the last one of the set. Walter was always a clumsy man. He moved through the world as if he was constantly being buffeted by invisible winds. I feared the worst when he returned from the airport that evening. I had prepared a comforting speech. I was ready to console him. But the look on his face told me I would not need it. She was there all right. Her name was Elena. She sat on the couch next to my husband. She looked smaller than I had imagined. Walter's smile was finishing up somewhere behind his ears. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. He was right to look pleased, I had to admit. All right, she would never win a beauty pageant. Her eyes were too close together and her legs a little short for that. But she had shining dark hair that fell to her shoulders. She had pert breasts that were clearly visible under her thin t-shirt. She had a nice smile that seemed genuine. Walter had done okay for someone whose courting had been carried out by email. She spoke good English too. It was accented but clear, although I could see her struggling to understand when Walter asked about average rainfall levels in her country. She just laughed and shook her head. I wondered at that moment if they had any real future together. He was in love with a place. She was in love with an idea. While Walter was in the kitchen making coffee, she confided in me. She told me she had always wanted to live in America. She said it was the land of opportunity and sunshine. I got the impression she was not planning to return to Europe in a hurry, if at all. She was looking for a new life, and Walter was her ticket. Walter came back into the room humming. He was carrying a tray with 3 cups of coffee. He was trying so hard to be a good host. I sensed then there were storms ahead. The air in the living room was thick with unspoken expectations. Elena quickly made herself at home. She had a way of occupying space that was both confident and unassuming. She unpacked her single suitcase in the guest room. Within a day, it felt like she had always been there. I was relieved that she seemed to get on well with Walter. Her presence had a calming effect on him. Somehow, he became a less intense person in her company. He was less focused on the weather outside. He was more focused on the women beside him. He even began to laugh at himself when she made fun of his never-ending questions about the climate of Mittel Europa. She told him, "But I love the weather here in Georgia. No fog, no snow. It is perfect." She would say it with a genuine sense of wonder. She could not understand why anyone would wish for clouds. She spent many hours tanning herself on the back patio. She would lie on a lounge chair with a paperback novel. Her skin drank in the sun like a thirsty plant. Walter joined her there only occasionally. He would bring her a glass of lemonade or a fresh towel. For someone whose business is the great outdoors, he seemed remarkably averse to experiencing it up close. He preferred his weather on a screen, mediated and controlled. He explained apologetically when Elena pointed this out to him. "The sun gives me a headache." He would squint into the bright light, his face pale and uncomfortable. One time, she talked us into spending the day at Lake Lanier. It was a hot, humid Saturday in July. The lake was crowded with boats and swimmers. I could not help observing the contrast in my companions. Elena, with her honey-colored body slick with sunscreen, she moved with an easy grace, at home in the heat. And my husband, looking like someone who had spent his whole existence under gray skies. He wore a large hat and a long-sleeved shirt. He looked pale and out of place, like a ghost at a barbecue. They would only be happy together if they swapped continents. He belonged in her world of fog and rain. She belonged in his world of relentless sun. So it concerned me that Walter had fallen for her. It was more than just a crush. He was utterly besotted. She liked him too, but more in the way of being a friend. She was grateful to him. She enjoyed his company. But the spark was not there for her. She shared his bed in the guest room. The walls are not thick in these old ranch houses. I could hear their late-night conversations, the murmur of their voices. There were few signs that she regarded him as anything more than a novelty. Walter, on the other hand, was like a small pooch. He had found someone to rub up against every moment of the day. He followed her from room to room. He hung on her every word. His work suffered. He was late for his broadcasts twice in 1 week. The traffic in his favorite chat rooms must have halved after he met Elena. But I realized it was true romance when he agreed to take her dancing. That was a sacrifice of monumental proportions. Let us just say the club scene is not Walter's natural habitat. He was a man of quiet pursuits and intellectual interests. Loud music and flashing lights were his idea of hell. The one and only time we had gone to a night spot together, it had been a disaster. He had stumbled on his way to the bar. He overturned a table of expensive drinks. The liquid splashed onto a group of menacing-looking men. He got himself threatened by a long-haired pretty boy he short-sightedly asked to dance. He had mistaken him for a woman from behind. To top it all off, he suffered a massive nosebleed. It was probably brought on by the stress of it all in the space of 10 chaotic minutes. There are twisters that have made less impact in that time. So for him to agree to go again for Elena was a testament to his devotion. The next day, they were not speaking over breakfast. The silence was thick and heavy. Elena stared at her plate of melon. Walter stared into his coffee cup. I attempted to lighten the mood. It was like trying to start a fire with damp wood. I asked my husband cheerfully, "The club still in one piece?" Although it was not the subtlest of openings, I have found the blunt approach works best with introverts like Walter. You have to force them out of their shell. Unusually sullen, he tried to ignore me. He just shook his head and took a loud sip of his coffee. I persisted. "So what happened?" I looked from his grim face to Elena's. She was carefully cutting her melon into tiny, precise cubes. I imagined he had fallen flat on his face on the dance floor. Or maybe he had tried to start a conversation about barometric pressure with the DJ, or set fire to himself or something. That had to be the reason why Elena sat there looking as if she'd prefer to put her melon slice up his backside than in her mouth. Walter said, "Ask her." That was all. Folding his skinny, pale arms, he looked like a petulant child. But Elena just shrugged and wandered out to the patio with her towel. She was not going to give me any answers. The sun was her solace. Things were more friendly that evening. A long stint of tanning always put Elena in a good mood. She came back inside with a healthy glow. I have never known anyone get more pleasure out of the sun. It was like she was trying to make up for 24 years of cold, hard winters in a few weeks. She had already gone from vanilla through butterscotch to a rich toffee color. There was a glow under the sheen of her skin, too. It was more than just a tan, a sort of inner radiance. It was as if her insides were enjoying the change of scene as much as the rest of her. She seemed to be storing up the sunlight. Walter had made the first move of reconciliation, of course. He could not stand to be in her bad graces for long. A puppy dog can only hold itself back for so long. He had gone to the store and bought her a box of chocolates. Elena told me with a smile afterwards. He brought me candy. She found his attempts to appease her endearing and a little pathetic. While Walter spent time with his computer, the new addiction not completely replacing the old, she confided in me. We were sitting in the living room. The evening news was on, but neither of us was watching. She liked him a lot, but thought their relationship was becoming too serious. She had not expected him to be so intense. I said I agreed. He had a tendency to focus on one thing at a time, to the exclusion of all else. This seemed to encourage Elena, and she leaned forward. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. She said, "Sometimes I wish he was more, how do you say, more like a real American." For a moment, I was confused. I flattered myself it was a pass, a strange, roundabout way of expressing an interest in me. But I soon realized she was just talking in general terms. She, too, could not help drawing comparisons, this time between her boyfriend and all the handsome men from the gyms in Buckhead. She had seen them on television and in magazines. It seemed that Elena had a fancy for bodybuilders. She thought they were the only true representatives of the American race, all muscles and confidence and golden tans. It was her obvious interest in other men that had sparked the row at the club the night before. Walter had seen her watching another man on the dance floor. His jealousy had gotten the better of him. But now, all was forgiven. Walter practically romped around her feet for the rest of the evening. He was just happy to have her attention back. There was no missing the gleam in Elena's eyes, however, whenever a big, good-looking guy appeared on TV. The storm clouds, I felt, were gathering overhead. It was only a matter of time before the next squall. Elena had been with us for a month when Walter started to talk about meeting her parents. He was already planning their future together. I think it was a genuine attempt to formalize their relationship. He wanted to do the honorable thing. In his innocence, he probably pictured a wedding in a pine grove with toasts and spiced vodka. He imagined himself being welcomed into her family. But it was also a first move towards his ambition of leaving Georgia. Leaving me. He saw it as a two-step plan. First, marry Elena. Second, move to Europe and become the world's greatest weatherman. It was no surprise that Elena showed zero enthusiasm for the idea. The last thing she wanted was to go back to the world she had just escaped. She pouted. "But I like it here, honey." She drew out the word honey. her accent making it sound exotic and strange. She was beginning to sound as well as look the part of a Georgia peach. She was bronzed to the point of reflecting back the sunlight. She had gained a few pounds and they suited her. She was brimming with health, looking as good to eat as a basted turkey. She grew angry when Walter kept on about going back with her to Europe. Their arguments became more frequent and more heated. The inner effulgence I had already noticed became more obvious at such moments. When she was angry, her skin seemed to flush with an inner light, as if some sort of volcano was smoldering away inside her. The eruption was not long in coming. It was one thing for Walter to be pale and skinny. It was bad enough that my husband did not look American, but not wanting to be American, that was a sin she could not forgive. When she finally exploded, it must have been heard at Stone Mountain. I was not there for the final confrontation. I was glad to have missed it. Walter was upset enough to come find me at the community theater where I volunteered. He stumbled in during our rehearsal of The Glass Menagerie. He was almost weeping, telling me that Elena had moved out. He said she had called him a pale, pathetic little man. He said she had thrown a vase at him. When I got back that evening, he was in his room. I could hear the clicking of the computer keyboard. The sound was a frantic, desperate rhythm. The net, an ever-present solace in times of trouble. He was back in his virtual world, seeking comfort from strangers. He never referred to his ex-girlfriend again. He erased her from his life as if she had never existed. I was secretly pleased. The house returned to its quiet equilibrium. I never mentioned it to Walter when I saw her one more time. It was a few weeks later. I was driving past a Kroger when I saw her strolling along the sidewalk with her new beau. He was exactly the type she had described. A side of beef in a singlet and cut-off shorts. His muscles had muscles. The statutory brush of greasy blonde hair reaching almost halfway down his back. It was mid-afternoon. The heat was shimmering off the pavement. A time when all right-thinking people in the Georgia heat have long since found air-conditioned heaven. But the two of them looked completely at home in the blistering sun. The pair of them looked as hot as hell. Elena had turned a deep charcoal. Her skin was almost black. I remember thinking her sun-broiled skin could have been used to toast bread. She looked happy. She laughed at something her companion said, and her laugh was loud and confident. Walter was back in the groove by then. He had found his old rhythm. A little work, a lot of research on the internet. He had taken the breakup hard for a time. For 2 weeks, he showed no interest in the weather at all. He made no reference to a spell of weather in the Alps, so atrocious it had even reached American TV screens. There were reports of record-breaking snowfall and deadly avalanches. The sort of climatic aberration that normally had him wetting himself with excitement. He just stared blankly at the screen. I knew things were on the mend, however, when he enthused to me about a blizzard that had hit the Low Countries. He showed me maps and charts. He explained the complex meteorological factors that had led to the storm. He looked happy for the first time in an age. He was himself again. And now, my niece Shirley is here. She arrived 3 months ago on a Greyhound bus, her own heart broken, her own life stalled. She came here for comfort, for a place to heal. She is my sister's child, but she has always been more like a daughter to me. For the first few weeks, she barely left her room. She slept for 18 hours a day. When she was awake, she cried. Then one day she came back from a walk with a small, flat stone in her palm. She had been down by the river. It was dark gray, almost black, and shot through with tiny golden veins. A piece of the riverbed captured. She polished it for an hour, sitting at the kitchen table while I drank my coffee. The motion was slow and methodical. The next day, she found another and another. Now her room is lined with them. They sit on her windowsill, on her dresser, on her bedside table, dozens of them, all dark, all smooth, all laced with that fool's gold, our own private treasure. She spends her days by the river now. She leaves early in the morning and does not come back until dusk. She comes home with muddy shoes and wet cuffs, her pockets heavy. Her clothes smell of river water and damp earth. She says nothing. She just takes out her polishing cloths. She has a whole collection of them, soft and worn. She rubs and rubs until the pyrite flecks gleam under the lamplight. It is the only activity that seems to bring her any peace. But it is a strange, unsettling peace. She is getting thin. The color has drained from her face. Her eyes have a feverish intensity I have not seen in many years. It is the look of someone who has found a new religion. I try to talk to her about the garden, about a book I am reading, about anything. I try to draw her back into the world of the living, but she is somewhere else, lost in the rhythmic motion of her hand, the soft whisper of cloth on stone, the soft whisper of cloth on stone. She is seeking a different kind of life. She craves a different kind of quiet, a quiet that worries me. This afternoon, I walked into her room. I was bringing her a glass of iced tea. The curtains were drawn against the bright Georgia sun. The room was dark and cool. The only light came from a small desk lamp. It cast a pool of yellow light on her desk. Shirley sat in its glow, her head bent over her latest discovery. It was another dark stone, larger than the others. Her hands moved in a slow, steady circle. The soft, repetitive whisper of cloth on stone was the only sound. She was so absorbed she did not hear me enter. She did not notice the glass of tea in my hand. The lamplight caught the side of her face, her pale skin. It was almost translucent, and I saw it. It was not a reflection from the stone she held. It was not a trick of the light. There was a glow under the sheen of her skin, too. It pulsed faintly, a soft and gentle light from within, a sort of inner radiance. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The iced tea glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. A pattern repeating, a cycle beginning anew, the same obsessive fire, just a different fuel. What do I do? What do I say to her? My thumb traces the rim of my cup. Faster now. The porcelain is cool against my skin. I think about Walter, happy in his ignorance. He is living his dream somewhere in Europe. He found a new girl online eventually. A fellow weather enthusiast from Belgium. He told me, "Don't worry, I checked this one out good. She hates hot weather and flying. My perfect woman." He was so confident. He was so sure he had finally figured it out. He asked for an extended holiday from the TV station. He packed his bags and bought a one-way ticket. He was finally going to see his wonderful, terrible weather. I wish him well, I truly do. There is one farewell present I will not be giving him. Any mention of a bizarre little piece in the local paper. It was a small article, buried on page 6. It was about a deeply tanned young woman who suddenly burst into flames. She burned to a crisp in the frozen food aisle of a downtown supermarket. The cold air did nothing to stop it. There was some speculation that it was a rare case of spontaneous combustion, a scientific anomaly. A follow-up story a few days later said how strange it was that no one had come forward to identify the woman. Not if she was an illegal immigrant and did not really know anyone, I thought. It would be unfair to share my suspicions with Walter. The last thing he needs is that sort of baggage. Let him have his blizzards and his gales. But surely, she is not a stranger. She is not a footnote in a local paper. She is my blood. She is my sister's daughter. How do I warn someone of a fire that burns from the inside out? How do I explain a danger that has no name? How do I tell her that her beautiful stones might be anchors pulling her down into a place with no name, a place of terrible light? I look over at the mantelpiece. It is cluttered with the artifacts of my life. Beside a photo of Walter and me, taken long ago when we were both still smiling, it sits there. The first stone Shirley found. It's the only one she lets me keep in the living room. She said it was a gift. A small, polished river stone with flecks of pyrite. I watch it. I have been watching it for days. My thumb stops its circling on the cup. My coffee is cold. I have forgotten it was there. The gold inside the stone began to turn. It happened slowly at first. A slow, silent storm inside the rock. The tiny flecks swirl. They are no longer fixed. Like a galaxy in miniature, they are moving. I must be imagining it. I must remember to tell Walter when he gets home. He will be so interested to hear. He loves strange phenomena. The date today is June 12th, 2002. He will be so interested to hear. This is not the weather he knows. This is not on any of his charts. This is something new. My thumb knows the path by heart. It circles the rim of the cup. The porcelain is cold now. The coffee has been cold for hours. I am sitting in the dark. The house is quiet. Shirley is in her room. She is with her stones. I can feel the silence from her room. It is a heavy silence, a waiting silence. I look at the stone on the mantel. The flecks of gold are moving faster. They spin in a tiny vortex, a silent golden whirlpool. The stone is humming. I cannot hear it with my ears. I feel it in my teeth. I feel it in my bones. The air in the room is growing thick. It is hard to breathe. The light from the stone is brighter now. It casts long shadows on the wall. The shadows dance and twist. They look like figures in a fire. My thumb has stopped moving. My hand is resting on the table. The stone on the mantel pulses. A soft golden light. It beats like a tiny heart. A heart made of rock and light. The light is spilling onto the floor. It crawls across the old wood. It is coming toward me, a slow, golden tide. I should move. I should run. I should scream. But I just sit here. I watch the light. It is beautiful. It is terrifying. The golden light touches my foot. It does not burn. It is warm, like the sun on a summer day. The light climbs up my leg. It feels like warm honey. I remember Elena. I remember her skin. I remember the glow, a pattern repeating. My thumb begins to move again, a slow, steady circle around the rim of my cup, a small, silent prayer for stillness in a world that never stops turning. A deep, sorrowful sigh escaped her lips. She placed the note back in my hand, her fingers cold against my skin. "Gloria, darling." Her voice was a gentle tide, trying to pull me under, to drown my convictions. "You have been under so much strain. Since Father passed, you misplace things. You forget. We both know this." She took a step closer. "Perhaps you wrote them a long time ago, a little diary for yourself, and you've simply forgotten." "I did not write these," I said, my voice rising, cracking. "This is not my writing. This is not my memory." "All right, dear. All right." She stood up and put her arms around me. It was like being hugged by a cloud. Her embrace was soft, yielding, and completely devoid of warmth. I stood stiffly, the notes crumpled in my fist against her back. "You're overwrought," she whispered into my hair. "Let me make you some tea. We'll sit and rest, and this will all feel like a bad dream." She led me to the kitchen as if I were a child. She bustled about, her movements efficient and calming. She filled the kettle, took down the cups, her presence filling the space, smoothing over the jagged edges of my fear. As I sat at the table, numb and silent, my gaze fell upon my own bedroom door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar. On my bedside table, catching the afternoon light, was a small, gleaming object, a golden brown seashell. I knew with a certainty that went bone deep that I had left that shell wrapped in a handkerchief in the back of my sock drawer. I had not touched it in weeks. My body went rigid. I stared at it, a tiny gleaming object in the dimness of my room. Ruth had moved it. She had gone into my drawer, into my private space and taken it, and she had placed it where she knew I would see it. It was a message, a reminder. I can go anywhere. I can touch anything. Ruth placed a cup of tea in front of me, the china clinking softly against the vinyl. "There now," she said, her voice a soothing balm. "Everything is all right." I looked from her calm, smiling face to the shell in my room, and a new, colder fear began to dawn. This was not a dream. This was a carefully constructed reality, and she was its architect. The house was no longer my home. It was a museum of my life, curated by my sister, and I was the main exhibit. The confrontation settled nothing. It was worse than nothing. It planted a seed of poisonous doubt in my own mind, a seed she watered with every cup of tea, every comforting word, every gentle, condescending touch. Was I losing my memory? Was I in some fugue state I couldn't recall, writing these notes myself, creating this elaborate, frightening game for some reason my conscious mind could not grasp? The thought was a chilling whisper in the quiet moments of the day. I started to watch myself, to monitor my own actions, a detective trailing her own shadow. I became a visitor in my own home. I observed its geography for the subtle shifts that signaled her passage. A book on the shelf moved an inch to the left. A salt shaker placed where the pepper should be. A window I had left open, now closed and locked. These were her footprints. Tiny disturbances in the landscape of my life. I began to feel like the house itself was her accomplice, conspiring against me with its groans and shadows. My quest for answers led me to the attic. It was a place Ruth rarely went, complaining of the dust and the oppressive heat. It was my territory, a repository of the past that I controlled, or so I thought. I was looking for the deed to the house, thinking some old legal document might hold a clue, a name, a piece of the unfamiliar handwriting. I told myself this was the reason, but a deeper, more primal instinct was guiding me. I was looking for the source. The attic was stifling. The air was thick and tasted of old wood, dust, and baked insulation. A single bare bulb cast a weak yellow circle of light. The heat was immense, a crushing weight. Sweat trickled down my temples and into my eyes. I moved slowly, my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust. I navigated the labyrinth of forgotten furniture and stacked boxes. There was a chest of my father's old things, a box of my mother's dresses, a collection of my own school textbooks with my name written on the inside cover. In a far corner, under a dusty canvas tarp, was a small stack of cardboard boxes. They were labeled in my own hand, Gloria, miscellaneous. These were things I hadn't looked at in decades. Report cards, childhood drawings, old letters from friends. I pulled the top box down. The cardboard was soft with age. I pried open the flaps. Inside, nestled amongst dried corsages and faded birthday cards, was an object that did not belong. It was a small, portable cassette recorder, a Panasonic with silver and black plastic. It was a model from the late 60s. I had never owned one. I picked it up. It was heavy, solid, a foreign object in this box of my own memories. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A wave of cold washed over me, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the attic. With a shaking hand, I pressed the button marked Eject. A cassette tape was inside. I carried the recorder downstairs. I went to my room. I closed the door. My hands were slick with sweat. I sat on my bed, the machine in my lap. The house was silent. Ruth was outside. I could hear the faint, rhythmic hiss of the sprinkler. I pressed the play button. A soft hiss filled the room, the sound of empty tape. Then, a voice. My voice. It was slow, halting, drugged. Each word was an effort. "Va, pen is cold," my voice on the tape said. A long pause filled the room. The sound of a pen scratching on paper followed. "The paper smells like vanilla." Another pause. The scratching sound continued. It was methodical and steady. I did not remember this. I had no memory of this at all. My mind was a blank wall. The scratching stopped. My recorded voice spoke again. It was thick and distant. October 4th, 1961. It was the date from the first note. I was listening to its creation. A faint metallic click sounded on the tape, the sound of the recorder being paused, then unpaused. Then another voice spoke. It was quiet, close to the microphone, a whisper. "Good, Gloria," it said. The voice was unmistakable. It was Ruth. "That's very good," she whispered. "Now the next part. Right. The shipment arrived late." The scratching on paper resumed, louder this time. My own voice, small and compliant, repeated her words. A child learning to read. The shipment arrived late. Golden brown as promised, Ruth's whisper prompted. Golden brown. I listened. I was frozen. My sister dictated every word. The note I found in the bird book. Her voice was patient, gentle. The voice of a teacher. The voice of a hypnotist. I was not the author. I was the instrument. The tape kept playing. There were other sessions. Ruth's voice, a soft murmur. My own, a hollow echo. She dictated the note about the blue dress. The note about my questions! It was all there, a record of my own unraveling, orchestrated by my sister. The helper, the confidant, the architect of my fear. Next to the tape recorder in the box, I had missed something. A small, spiral-bound notebook. Its cover was plain brown cardboard. I opened it. The first page was my own handwriting, not the slow script from the notes, my regular, hurried scrawl. It was a journal I did not remember keeping. The first entry was dated a week after our father died. Ruth says, I need to write things down or I will forget. She says, my mind is like a sieve. She is helping me. We have a new game. She calls it the memory game. She tells me what to write. She says it will help me hold on to things. Page after page detailed the sessions, my own words describing her instructions, her justifications. It was a manual of my own gaslighting, written in my own hand. On the very last page, there was only one entry. Taped to the center of the page was a small shell. Its lustrous surface caught the dim light, the golden brown seashell. Beneath it was a single line of text. It was written in my own clear hand. A line I must have written, a line I did not remember. Ruth says this one is for proof. Bay,